好，我来看看 waiting room 消除掉。
对，可以把它对 turn off。
你们现在如果
我在点的。
如果你有 YouTube 的 link，现在应该是可以了。
帮忙问一下，看他们具体什么情况，能不能在九月份的时候，然后来报名？
对，这就是 YouTube 上的声音，
是吧？YouTube 声音传到我们这来了，
他放了。
那个立松，你可能要，就是我们开始以后就要把所有人都关掉，是吧？你可以控制的。
现在34个人进来了。
对，我们那个好几个人都可以控制，我们有几个 co-host 都可以控制。
那么小易也要再提醒大家，就讲，至少在前面的时候要经营一下，把所有这个都 mute 掉。这个估计要提醒几次，因为有的时候大家家长一进来忘记掉了，他又打开了。
好。
上次就搞像干扰，好像没停，有一段时间就一直有干扰。
Jessica 上来了。
那个我们这个100个人都可以看得见，是吧？只要大家可以。
对。Amy。展燕上来了。
Hey, hi, Alan, how are you? Hi, Alan.
Oh, hello.
Jackie. Yeah, how are you, Jackie?
Good.
Nice to see you.
How are you?
Good, good. Do we have any other speakers here?
I'm here.
Oh.
Or is here. Jessica
Amy.
is here. Amy is here.
Hi, Amy.
Did you get my iPad?
我没拿，我这开始了。
I want to say hello.
Hi.
你有没有就
Hi
是
everyone.
你就坐这里听啊，
Okay.
你就头不要露出来，拿个凳子。
为什么不可以露出来？
Your microphone is on.
Yeah, I can hear you.
人家还看得见。
那李楠你就一直盯着吧。
我盯着那个 chat 里边的 question， 我在盯着那个这个要进来的。
进来的竹山可以盯，你就盯着 question。
我在
可以的，我
对。
好的。
要一个人一件事情比较好啊。
但是我觉得这个
Jessica saying 她的那个 audio isn't working. I'm going to leave and rejoin. OK， 她现在下去再重新上来 ，Jessica。
OK。Alan, Jackie, Amy, Lee and Jessica. OK。现在我们有多少了？那个展燕你好。
你好。
那个我这里还没。
现在有44个人了。
总数有44。
现在44个。
我估计大概今天100个大概可能会有，是吧 ？OK。
我们希望吧，沈老师。
YouTube 上面有12个人在看啊。
YouTube。
立松有没有办法把这个 waiting room 取消掉？现在就是
我应该已经取消掉了。还有吗？我已经
没有看到这边没有显示，没有人在 waiting room 里。
现在没有，但是刚才还是不停的在 waiting room。对，
现在还有
一
个在 waiting room。
所以我就说把它取消掉吧，这样子会 limit 这个人的进场。
我在 setting 里面已经取消掉了，我不知道为什么还有。
OK。
那么大家注意一下，只要是看见 waiting room 有这个。
我这边他有谁要进 waiting room， 我再点一下好了。
好的。因为估计这个星期五大概有一些家长也可能会拖拖拉拉，所以这个也可能会有至少5分钟。
I just disabled the waiting room. Do you want me to enable it again?
Yeah, he did, but I don't know why it doesn't work.
I tried, and then I did. I did disable it, but.
Oh, I just disabled it, and it seems to be working.
Great.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, that's good.
Great.
OK，
高
一现在
我们开始吗？你们可以看到我们现在。
OK。
我们要不7点05分，再等5分钟。
7点35。
7:35。
现在可以看到我吗？
可以。
对，
可以看到我。OK。
你正好在当中。
你的世界在哪儿？
对，咱们再等2分钟，7:35开始吧。所以，小易，我就说那个7:35你先开始，然后沈老师讲话，然后我们再开始 speaker 讲。
对，我会按这个顺序哈，我事先安排的日程来走哈。
对，
安平，小易，我是洛平，我们家 Jessica 上来了吗？
上来了，
我看到了。
上来了。
OK， 好，就 check 一下，不知道。
他刚才掉下去过，洛平。
他刚才说他的 audio 不 work， 他重新上的。
OK， 他在他自己楼上，我们在。
对，他说 audio 不 work， 他重新又上了一下。
好的。
你们如果还有谁需要成为 co-host 告诉我哈，我现在正在 try to make sure everyone can help。
立松最好能把你这个 link 直接发到群里边，他们一点就很方便。
我这边也再发一下吧，把它放到群里边。
对，
行，
好，那我们就开始吧。
OK。
好，大家晚上好，今天还是由我来主持牛顿教育促进会第4届教育论坛。我们的目的，牛顿教育促进会是一个公益教育平台，其宗旨是帮助和促进牛顿家庭的学生获得高质量的学习、健康和社交及情感认知方面的整体发展。继7月份，我们请到了 NESN 同学，具有代表性的人物为我们论坛抛砖引玉。1个月之后的今天，我们又荣幸的请到了生活在我们身边的5位同学，以关爱共享的故事给我们分享。感谢展燕和色真事先整理了一些大家关注的问题，同学们将会以姓氏的顺序来演讲。大家以包容的心态去倾听不同的声音，让我们在教与学中和孩子们一起学习，共同进步。今天特别要感谢我们的技术总管刘立松，他花了很多的时间调节 Zoom 的管理形式，并且将活动与 YouTube 同步上线，解决了上次100人之后不能上网的这个问题，让我们每一个人都能顺利的参会。感谢牛顿教育促进会、牛顿教育促进会9位同仁们的共同努力。有刘立松、色真、傅展燕、刘浩元、李楠、胡建辉、李竹山、沈安平和我们一起紧锣密鼓的工作，共同努力，在这短时间内安排了本次就绪的论坛。那下面呢，我们有一些规则，我来讲一下。欢迎大家直接的交流，同时可以在 chat 上把你的意见反映出来。Zoom host 立松做了许多的工作，他会把这个 chat 的内容集中起来，等一下在主讲人结束之后，他会提出来哈。好，另外呢，我们进行全程的录像如果哪一位有疑问，或者可以把视频关闭，没有问题，你也可以私信给立松。另外呢，大家要把这个语音 mute 了。还有一点就是活动时间呢，我们是7点半到9点半。那这个时间呢结束之后，如果哪位还想继续座谈，我们可以以非正式的形式畅所欲言。5位同学都是以英文为主来讲述，哪一位有疑问，无论是中英文，都可以请色真为大家翻译。这就是我们今天的一些 规定哈，请大家互相的提醒，遵守一下。下面我们来请沈安平会长讲一讲，好吗？
好，谢谢大家谢谢各位参加我们这一次这个牛顿教育促进会的第4次教育论坛，非常感谢这个小易给我们做了一个开场白。今天我们非常高兴的请到这5位同学，都是我们牛顿家庭的自己的下一代，那么也包括我们这个在座的家长的孩子，这些都是我们比较有代表性的优秀的这个孩子。那么同时呢，我也想在这里再一次感谢所有帮助我们筹办这一次活动的这些家长因为这些活动呢有需要很多细节的工作，所以能够在比较短时间内把它组织起来呢，我们也非常感谢大家的帮助，特别感谢这5位同学在很短的时间内为了帮助支持我们的这个牛顿教育促进会的工作，也为了支持我们社区的这个教育活动，都在这个假期内很忙的时间里抽出时间来。So let me say a few words in English. I'm very grateful that we are going to have this number 4 education forum. This is the first time we're doing this. And last time we had education forum, we invited one student who graduated from Newton South about 5 years ago. Was wonderfully accepted and received by over 100 people. So we like to do this again. And this time we like to open to more students. So we have 5 students and they can talk from their own perspective, which will give parents and our students more chance to learn even more experiences and ask more questions. And lastly, I like let you know that the Newton Education Support Network has the mission to help families in Newton and help the students in Newton school system to have better experience for learning, for growth, and for their future studies in college and beyond. So I think that's a wonderful opportunity. So let me finish my conversation and let me pass to my friend and also our NESN leader, Cedrin and Serten, to continue. Serten, 谢谢。
谢谢沈老师。Hello, everyone. It is with a great pleasure that I welcome all of you, honorable guests and panelists, to the 4th Educational Forum organized by Newton Education Support Network. And thank you so much for spending a Friday night with us. My name is Sejun, and I will be the moderator today. Today we have an amazing session titled Sharing is Caring. And this is going to be an opportunity for us to hear from 5 outstanding panelists who graduated from Newton North and Newton South high schools on various topics, ranging from academic studies, time management, relationship with parents, college application process, and so much more. So here's how we're going to organize today's session. The first half of the meeting will be reserved for individual presentations from the panelists. I will briefly announce the panelist's name and give a brief introduction. And then the panelist, he or she will do a short presentation session. The second half of this discussion will be a Q&A session. Thanks to Jian's Google survey form, we have collected quite a lot of questions from our audience ahead of time. And the panelists have reviewed the questions and they will answer the questions. During the forum, if you have any questions, please type your questions in the chat. And one of us will be collecting the questions, and then we will send those questions to our panelists. And with this, we would like to start today's session. So today's session, we have panelists. Oh, if I can. So we have 5 panelists, and they will be presenting today. Our first guest is Ellen Deng. Ellen, she is a rising sophomore from Harvard University. And when she was a student at Newton South, she was involved in speech and debate, science team, and founded Aspiration in Medical Club. And she's also a principal violinist at Boston Youth Symphony. Please join me welcome Ellen Deng. Ellen, take it over.
Hi, everyone. Again, thank you so much for everyone for putting this together and taking your time to, be here with us on this Friday night. So again, my name's Ellen. I went to Newton South High School. I go to Harvard currently, and I mean, we call it concentration, but I'm currently thinking about concentrating in chemical and physical biology, which is just a fancy way to say biochemistry, and a secondary, which is minor in history. So Seldron already talked about some of my high school activities, but again, in high school, I did debate. I founded the Aspirations in Medicine Club at Newton South, which is for people who are interested in going into the medical field. I also participated in science team, newspaper, and I taught math at Mathnasium, which is in Newton Center. I also conducted research at BU during the summer, and in my weekends, I spent them playing violin for the Boston Youth Symphony. And currently in college, I conduct research at Massachusetts General Hospital. I'm an editor for the Harvard Crimson, and I'm part of the Asian American Women's Association. So the first thing I want to acknowledge for everyone is that this is an incredibly stressful time. I think, at least for me, and I'm sure that this trend will be further explored later, but we all come from immigrant families who have never gone through this college application process before. We have no idea what an SAT is. My mom thought ACT meant ACT, so that's a first way to, figure out that I honestly had no idea what I was doing. And that brings me to my first point today, which is that when you don't know what you're doing, like me, what I did was I did activities and I took the classes that I was really passionate about. So when I was doing, and I guess thinking about college, but I wasn't really thinking about college, I was pursuing the activities I loved and I was taking classes that challenged me. So in terms of math, I really liked math. So I skipped a level in math and I took a class at Harvard during the school year, which was really, really cool, but I wasn't doing it to get into a college. I was more doing it because I felt challenged and I loved school. But I also took, for example, I was not that interested in French, so I didn't take like the highest level of French because I wanted to dedicate all my time to the activities and the courses I loved. And I think it's totally okay to not take every single class at like the highest level you can just because you want that honors or AP credit, which is not what Harvard wants to see, or it's not what any school really wants to see. They just want to see you, be you, and do things that you're passionate about. In terms of my relationship with my parents during this time, my parents were incredible during this entire process. They were so chill during high school. They never pushed me to do anything I didn't want to do. And they pushed me to excel in the things that I wanted to excel in, but they never made me do anything. They never put any pressure on me in any way. For example, once I cried because I thought I did poorly on a chemistry exam, and my parents were like, "It's totally fine," while I was literally sobbing in the car. You'll be happy to hear I did well on it, but that's an example of, a good, in my opinion, it was a good relationship with my parents in that I felt really supported in everything I was doing, but I didn't feel necessarily pushed to do something I didn't want to do. Because honestly, if you're doing something that you aren't passionate about, it's just a waste of everyone's time. You're not going to do it well. And, why are you spending your time doing it if you're not going to do well? So one of the questions that was posed and submitted was, what AP courses did you take and what GPA is considered to be good enough to apply to a competitive school? So I will be honest, I think if you're from Newton, Newton is relatively wealthy, and thus competitive schools typically require competitive GPAs from Newton, but you certainly do not need a perfect GPA to get into selective schools. And again, just to reiterate my first point, if you take courses that you're passionate about that challenge you, I think that your course load should be perfectly fine. Another question that came up was what I did during the summer. So I did debate camp, but I also memorably, I conducted research at BU through a program called BU Rise, where I conducted an independent research project and then presented my research at a poster symposium. So I highly recommend just finding a program or an internship during the summer that is something that you're really passionate about and can spend all your time doing. I think my next point is the law of diminishing returns. So what is that? Essentially, this sort of segues into my next point, which is that to not sweat the difference between, for example, like a 95 or an 100. There is a difference between an 85 and a 90, but not necessarily a 95 or 100. And this also ties into time management. So I think that you should dedicate your time, and at least for me, I stayed very busy. I dedicated my time to the things I loved. Filling up my schedule forced me to be productive and avoid procrastination. But I never tried. I think this is one of my biggest regrets in high school, was that I dedicated too much time to worrying about the minute details between 95 and 100 versus spending it on more time on things and activities that I really enjoyed rather than trying to study every single minute detail. But one of the other questions was sort of time management suggestions you have. So for me, I used all the free time I had. On breaks from tutoring math, I would study for my US history class by reviewing my study terms on a separate sheet of paper. And when I drove home from math, I would always look at a chemistry problem before and try to solve it in my head as I drove home, so that when I got home, I was able to maximize my time at home and solve everything that I needed to. My next point is to work in a service job no matter your income. And this is, I guess, a little bit unrelated to college applications, but I think it's important to be a good person. So a service job includes working as a clerk at CVS Pharmacy. It includes serving food, as a waitress, scooping ice cream, working at Panera, doing whatever. I worked at Flower Bakery and Cafe the summer before my freshman year of college. And I think that it is like one of the most important things that anyone should do, regardless of your income. You gain so much respect for workers, you gain skills in communication and finance. I learned to communicate with all different types of people and learned how to navigate a workplace, as well as learned to work on a team and gain a really great appreciation for the service workers in our economy. So I think that that is just one of the most essential things, and it is just so important to be a good and compassionate human being. And my last point is to be courageous. And this extends to everything that you should do. And this is something I'm still personally working on. So for example, be courageous when you're applying to colleges, reach out. Obviously, I never thought that I could get into Harvard or any single competitive school ever. And, my parents and my friends pushed me to be courageous and step outside and aim for something that I never thought I could do. And it turned out well. But this also extends to being in the classroom. So in high school, I would try to avoid, thinking about what other people would care about me, because I remember, no one really remembers if you say something really stupid, but teachers will remember if you're passionate about their class, and they will give you opportunities, because honestly, Newton has so many opportunities. You just have to go out and get it. And I think that that is one of the most important things. But also being courageous extends to trying new things that you never thought you'd be able to do. For example, I never thought that I wanted to compete competitively, I guess, for science team. But when I did it, it turned out I was great at it, and I found some great friends and learned a lot through it. So that brings me to my last point, is that be courageous in every single thing that you do.
Oh, Ellen, thank you for sharing your story with us. It's really interesting, the law of diminishing returns. It's so true. Often I feel as parents, especially as Asian parents, we always want to push our children to achieve that A+. But sometimes we don't realize from 95 percentile to 100 percentile might require 20% of effort or more. It is so important. I also like you mentioned about working a service job, no matter your income, because you do learn a lot. It's going forward to work in the workplace. The most important thing is a network, to be able to work with all kinds of people.
Exactly.
You should work with your boss or your coworker, even janitors. You need to ability to talk to them, to bond with them. It's so important. I'm so glad you brought up this point. Thank you.
Yeah, and to elaborate a little bit, I think that, I think Asian parents push our children, which rightfully so, to excel academically. But I think sometimes what is lost in translation is to grow not only as an academic and not only in knowledge, but as a person and as a functioning member of society. And I think that is why it is so important to work in a service job, for example.
Absolutely, very nice. So we look forward to hearing more from you at the Q&A session. Okay, so I just want to mention that what we're trying to do is the first session will be individual presentation. We will leave the Q&A session, the second part. So I'll be asking questions and to address those Q&A questions. Okay. Our next speaker is, if I can get, yeah, it's Li Ding. So Li is a rising junior at Brown University studying applied mathematics. While studying at Newton South, he was involved in Boy Scout, speech and debate, and Future Business Leaders of America. So please join me, welcome Li. Li, welcome.
Sounds good. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Lee. I am currently a rising junior at Brown, concentrating in applied math. 我的中文名字叫丁家泰，所以要是你们有什么英文的问题或中文问题都能回答。好，now, so going back, just a little bit about me. Wait, can you go back one slide? Sorry. Yeah, wait, can you go back one slide? Yeah. Sorry about that. But yeah, so I went to Newton South. I graduated around 2 years ago. And at South, I did a bunch of things, but kind of my main three activities were Boy Scouts, speech and debate, and FBLA. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just a little about me. I think for my kind of little time slot here right now, I'm gonna just kind of talk about my high school experience. Kind of mention, kind of use these primary points of discussion as just like little tidbits of things that have helped me along the way. So that I hope will help you guys as well. So I kind of just like going back, I definitely would say my time at South was not perfect by any means. I think I was ordinary in a lot of ways, but one thing that has helped me a lot throughout my journey through South and now at Brown was just developing resilience. Actually, just like early on when I was coming to school, like transitioning to high school was a rough experience for me. Definitely, there was a lot that I struggled with, kind of whether it was trying to turn in papers on time, or I actually got cut from the debate team my first year just because I didn't have everything together. But really, like as kind of I struggled and kind of hit like failure after failure, really like helped me learn to kind of just like push forward and take these opportunities as not just kind of like a failure, but rather as an opportunity to learn. And really through these opportunities, kind of even like I kind of treated every mistake, every like thing as an opportunity to grow and really develop as a student and as a person. So kind of through my experiences, I really like developed all these great study skills, great habits, and really like learned a lot about myself. And I think definitely when I'm talking to people, I always tell them like, sort of like rather than focusing on just like success or failure in this kind of like black and white lens, that you should really just like change your mindset and really focus on the journey and really focus on growing and changing and really embracing kind of like the difficulties that might come ahead. Because like whether it's in high school, whether it's in college, there's definitely going to be struggles of some sort. But the right way to handle these struggles is really to like push forward and really use them as opportunities to like grow as a person. And I think that kind of transitions to my next point, which is just to say it's not too late to start. As mentioned, I was cut from the debate team my freshman year, but if you looked at my description at the previous slide, it said I did speech and debate in high school. And the reason why is because I joined speech team in my sophomore year. And in addition to that, I actually joined FBLA in my junior year. And this is just to say that when I was joining these activities, I was actually kind of nervous about like whether I was kind of behind everyone, whether I was like starting too late. But really as time went on, as I like invested myself in these activities, I really like realized that like as long as I was passionate and like what I was doing, like it didn't really matter. Like as long as I just like put in the work and really like did what I needed to like make the most of my time there, like I realized like even though I started late, that I still had a very meaningful experience. And I think this is just like not to say like you should join things like late or anything, but it's more that like if you are interested in something and just don't be afraid to kind of just like jump right in, like as like early or late you feel like it is, just jump right in and just like give it a your all, because as long as you're really like invested in it, you're gonna do well. And then kind of gonna move on from that. I think something that has helped me figure out like what drives me, what like really helps me like figure out like what I was interested in, kind of what drove me to join speech, drove me to join FBLA later on, was really just pausing from time to time and like reflecting on myself and kind of my goals, my values, and just things that matter to me. I think from my observation, kind of in high school, in college, there's definitely a lot of pressure. Kind of, it can be easy to get like caught up in just doing things for the sake of just doing things, and you don't really know why you're doing it, but everyone around you is doing it, and so you kind of feel obligated to do so. Kind of what I've been doing and like what I've been trying to do is just really slow down at times and just like zoom out and try to figure out like what the perspective on everything is. And kind of through that, by thinking about what I valued, what I was passionate about, it really led me to figure out like activities I wanted to join, like majors, and then like things I want to do later on in college. So I think one way to illustrate it is just talking about like speech and debate and FBLA. I think for me, the reason why after being cut from debate, I decided to go back to speech was because there's this like I had this passion of just like telling dumb jokes and just like trying to make people laugh. And there's this one part of speech called interp, which is like you do like a lot of performance stuff, and you try to like make people laugh and like whatever. And I thought that was really cool, like something I want to do. So I thought like I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna tell dumb jokes, but I'm also gonna like grow as a public speaker. Like that's really cool. So that's kind of why I decided to join speech, and that's kind of like what drove me like through all the years at speech. And I think moving on from that, my next point just to be treating yourself and others with kindness. I think it's a really stressful time right now. Whether you're in high school and college, just there's a lot going on, and I think the most important things at the end of the day is really just being healthy and being well. I think every time I talk to my parents about like everything I'm worried about, like whether it's kind of like schoolwork, like what I'm gonna do in the future, like applying to colleges, every time the first thing you say is just like, as long as you're healthy, like things will be all right. And I think just like it does make sense because like if you are sick or if you're unwell, like you really can't do much else. So what I really recommend, just like whether you're in high school, whether you're in college or like beyond, is really just like taking time to invest in yourself, whether it's just like eating healthy, exercising, or just like making sure you take time to really like ensure that you are doing well, like in some way. And then also like I put this in here as well, just because it's something I value, but it also sounded nice in the like in the little blurb, but just also make sure to treat others with kindness. Definitely there's a lot of stressful things going on. And kind of for me, like whether it was kind of worrying about whether like which internships like people were getting or which colleges people were applying to, there's a lot of opportunities like for you to kind of fall into kind of like these traps of like jealousy, like envy, just like bad things. And just like at the end of the day, like in my opinion, like I think the number one thing is just like to be a good person and then just like treat others with kindness. So just to make sure like be a good person to others. And then like finally, I think this is just like an overarching theme throughout my time in high school and college is just like it's okay to be a little lost. Definitely in high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do in the future. There was just like a lot that like I wanted to figure out. And even coming to college, I was still trying to figure things out. Like I wasn't too set on my major. I wasn't too sure what I want to do with the future, but I think something that has been helpful was just developing the sense of like, okay, it's okay to be a little lost, but at the same time, I want to make sure I'm exploring meaningfully and really like taking steps to figure out things I might be interested in. So there's actually this, I recently heard this NPR podcast and what they said was just like the kind of your 20s and like you can probably apply it to your like teens as well. It's really just a time to make sure like you should really explore and just figure out like what you value and like things you are really like driven by. And that was like something that really struck me, and something that I've been trying to kind of like work into my life as well. So in terms of like exploration, one example would be like in college, kind of figuring out my major. I actually started as a business major, like kind of doing business related things, but then I realized it wasn't really for me. So I was just like kind of lost. And so I was talking to professors and just like looking around, and I discovered like fields like biostatistics and operations research, for example, that were really interesting to me. And so right now I'm doing a lot of research like in that area. I'm talking to professors, I'm taking courses, and this is sort of like one way I've been trying to explore meaningfully. So yeah, this is kind of a little bit about myself. I'm happy to answer any questions, either in English or in Chinese later in the session. So yeah, that is all I have for right now.
Lee, thank you for sharing your very inspirational stories. And there's so many things we can learn. Value resilient is just so important, as we have a Chinese proverb, right? We said 失败是成功之母, or failure is the mother of success. And throughout your time growing up, so we learn from our failure. And so if you experience many small failures, it will help you to basically handle big failures in life. I feel as parents, Asian parents, including myself, we try to basically help to smooth out the path for our children, that we actually deprive them from developing resilience in this path. So it's just so important to learn all these things. Thank you, Lee. And then, yeah, we have plenty of questions once in the Q&A session. I look forward to hearing more from you. Our next speaker is Jackie. So Jackie is a rising junior at Wellesley College, studying biological science and philosophy. Very interesting. In high school, Jackie served as two-term editor-in-chief in Newton's North School newspaper and was a member of the varsity swim team and track team. So impressive, Jackie. Welcome, Jackie. Take it over.
Hi, thank you. I'm Jackie, or in Chinese, my name is Gongjie Kai. And yeah, so I'm a rising junior at Wellesley College. I'm studying biology and philosophy. And in high school, I went to Newton North. I was on the school newspaper, so I served as the editor-in-chief for 2 years. And I was a part of the swim team and track teams. And I also had a chance to do a little bit of independent research in the geosciences, which is really cool. So I guess, yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So one thing that I find really valuable, and this kind of touches on what Ellen and Lee were saying too, is that I think everyone should have the chance in high school to sort of explore the interests that you have outside of the classroom. So like outside of when you're in math class or English class. So for me, that was being on the swim team, being on the track team, being on the newspaper. And I learned a lot of really valuable skills from these extracurriculars. So for example, on the swim team, I learned to cheer other people on and support my teammates, especially if they had a bad race or they were upset over something. On the track team, where my performance maybe wasn't as strong as I was a swimmer, I learned to really just prioritize my own personal physical health and embrace self-improvement just for the sake of just growing. And on the newspaper, I learned how to advocate for my own ideas and ask good questions, as well as organizing large-scale projects. And one other thing that I found really valuable while working on the newspaper was that I learned how to really confidently converse with strangers. So I guess an example of this would be, there's this speech competition we have. I don't know if they have it at Newton South, but it's called the Sophomore Speech Competition. And it's kind of like in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so all the sophomores in their English classes write speeches, and there's like a little contest. I guess it's not that little, it's for the whole school. But there's a contest that they hold for the speeches. And the winner gets to give a speech at this citywide Martin Luther King Junior Day celebration or event. And so that's like to the whole city. And so it was sophomore year, and they held the contest, and I had this assignment to report on who the winner was and write an article about it. And I went to the contest, I saw who won, and they had this sort of English department celebration for the winners and the finalists afterwards. And so I went and I talked to the winner, who I knew from some of my other classes. I talked to the head of the English department. I talked to the principal, and then I interviewed the person who was organizing the out-of-school event, the citywide celebration that was going to happen later in the week. And so after I interviewed all these people, my English teacher was also at the event, and he came up to me and he said, "Oh, like, I just saw you interview this person, and like they're not in our school community. And I'm really impressed that you were just able to come up to someone you didn't know and just start chatting with them," right? Like, I would never be able to do that. Like, I would be way too self-conscious. I would be way too scared. And I thought that was really funny because at that point, the job I had was news reporter, and I was doing that like twice a week, just like coming up to people I didn't know and asking them for an interview. And yeah, I guess in that moment, I realized that I was learning a lot of really valuable people skills in my extracurriculars. And also, I guess I found it especially funny just because he was this like really tall, like intimidating looking, like 6'2", like full grown adult. So yeah, it just goes to show that you can learn a lot even when you're not in the classroom. And I just feel like a lot of these skills that I've learned are things that I still practice in college, like taking care of my physical health and staying healthy. And I'm really glad that in high school I had the chance to learn these skills early on. The next thing I want to talk about is valuing mental health. So I feel like lately there's been a little bit more sort of, I guess, awareness or prioritization of mental health, whether you're a student, whether you're just in the workforce as an adult. But I feel like sometimes mental health stigma can feel really heavy, right? So maybe if you're struggling mentally, you don't want to share maybe your struggles, or you feel like people will shame you or say like, oh, like this person is like less than because of whatever mental health struggle they may have gone through. And I think that can be not healthy, you know, like I think in high school, it's a super stressful time, right? And I think it's okay for people to admit that, yeah, like maybe this test I took was really hard, or I'm falling a little bit behind on my assignments and I need some support. So I think both parents and students I encourage parents and students to really be open to discussing struggles that you're having and sort of normalizing mental health struggles that you may be having. And yeah, so I guess my general hope would be that people can all get to a point in the community where students can feel really well supported mentally. And kind of on a sort of similar point, I think that people should also be taking time to value their mental health as much as their physical health. Just like if you like break your foot and you have trouble walking, right? You're struggling to walk, then I think it's not that different from if you are struggling mentally and you need maybe professional help or you need someone to talk to. So those are just my thoughts on people's mental health and kind of spending more time to take care of yourself in that regard, kind of like what Lee was saying, and sort of treating yourself well and being kind to yourself. And the next thing I want to talk about is empowerment through racial identity. So I am a part of Wellesley Asian Alliance in college. And so this is an organization for students of Asian descent where we can sort of discuss political issues and also social issues that are affecting Asian or Asian American students on campus. And I think that having sort of a self-understanding of sort of where you fit in society through your race can be really important, just because you know, we live in a multicultural society, and being able to have the language to discuss your ideas and your own race can be very empowering, I find. And I think in high school, especially in Newton, there are a lot of opportunities for students to really embrace this. So for example, there were 2 really great Asian American teachers at Newton North, and they organized to support the Asian Culture Club, where they facilitated some really great discussions for Asian American students on race. And they also even were able to work race theory into the curriculum, where they hosted or they held an Asian American literature class, which I took senior year of high school. It was really great. And so I would just encourage students to really seek out these opportunities, because I think they are becoming more available. And it's just great. It's just it's really good to feel more confident about yourself and your racial identity. And the last thing that's kind of connected to this that I want to talk about is making sure that students have sort of a sense of independence. So having a sense of self, as I said earlier, is kind of crucial to growing and learning as a high school student. And I think having autonomy is a really big part of that. So for example, maybe being allowed to just set your own homework schedule, or maybe if you're a parent, allowing your child to really just determine what their interests are in academics, or even if it's just something as simple as like just letting them go out for ice cream, right? Even if their homework is not done, but they want to hang out with their friend, it's kind of giving them that sort of autonomy and that trust to say, okay, like you'll be able to set your own schedule and determine when and where you're going to get things done, which is something that I really appreciated from my parents, was that they were able to allow me to have that trust where they would say, okay, we know that you have like this whole list of things to do, right? High school is really busy. You have a lot of to-do list items, but they were able to say, okay, you have all these things to do, but I know you're able to organize your time in a way where you can have time to relax, right? And see your friends, but also take time to schedule in when you're going to be able to do work. And I felt like this was really helpful for me because it gave me time to explore hobbies. So like my interests outside of academics, like I mentioned earlier, but also even in the academic realm, like I was really interested in science, even in high school. And I reached out to a friend whose dad was working at Wellesley College, and he was in the geosciences department. And I was like, oh, like I'm really interested in science. I was wondering if I'd be able to just sort of see what you do or like help out in any way. And what ended up happening was sort of from that original interest, I was able to work with his lab a little bit. And then I received a grant where I was able to do my own geoscience research. So I looked at lead levels in the air of community gardens in Boston, which is really cool. I really love that. And it actually, that professor ended up being sort of the reason why I really got interested in Wellesley College. So honestly, if it wasn't for that initial sort of like interest and reaching out to him, I probably would go to a different school right now. So yeah, those are just my general thoughts. If anyone has any questions on any of these topics later, feel free to let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. So many great points from your speech. So just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions to any of our panelists, make sure you type in those questions in the chat. So after the prepared session, we will review the questions and let the panelists answer the questions. And Jackie, it's your point for value mental health, like physical health, it's just so important because in this society, we actually stay fit physically, right? We hit the swimming pool, we train our body, we do weight training, we do biking, we do Pilates, all kinds of things. But then there's very little option to do mental training. It's actually, if you think about your mind, it's like a physical mind has muscles. You have to do some training. I think in all the Eastern society, in China, in Japan, you have some meditation. I feel meditation actually can train the subconscious mind to do that. And then no mental health issue. It's an issue in all the societies. So We just need to call it out, make sure that people treat it not as some kind of disease or something, we have a correct attitude to do that. This is so interesting. I look forward to hearing more from you at the discussion session. Okay, so our next panelist is Amy. Amy is a rising senior at Cornell University. She's currently studying environmental engineering. And she's also a member of the Cornell gymnastic team. And she's also serving as a team captain of the varsity team. And at high school, Amy did gymnastics and lots of gymnastics. So please join me welcoming Amy. Welcome, Amy.
大家好，我是准备了先用中文介绍自己，所以一会儿再换到英文。我现在要上高四，在康大就是 Cornell， 专业是环境工程。我是2017 Newton North graduate, and I did a lot of gymnastics, as you can see in the introduction. 我们每个星期大概训练16到18个小时。So yeah, I didn't really spend a lot of time doing other extracurriculars. Seeing that gymnastics was my main extracurricular and where most of my time went. But within gymnastics, I learned a lot about taking risks and being confident, and also how to train and like work up to a level. Like when you watch gymnastics, it seems wild that anyone can just throw themselves across a bar and like catch the bar again. But we learned that you do all these drills, you do the practice, and eventually you have to trust your body and all this training and just go for it. And that can be really scary, but you learn that taking the risks works out after a lot of this training. I would say that in high school, one of my regrets was actually not taking art class. Instead, I took a lot of engineering classes and robotics, drafting. Like I made use of Newton North Tech Ed and Career Vocational Program, but I kind of knew that I wanted to do engineering already. So I feel like doing these classes where I did learn some, I got to learn how to use these computer programs and build robots. It wasn't that new. Like we were learning some of the very same things in physics, and a lot of these computer skills would eventually transfer to college, which is cool, but just like things like art class aren't really easy to come by once you get older. I'm not going to be able to take a class where I get free instruction, where I get free materials, and it's kind of built into my daily schedule. I can choose to take art class in college, but it requires a lot more studio hours, which can be difficult to work into a college schedule, and I would have to pay for all the materials on my own. So it's just not as accessible. And that leads to my point about just doing things for fun, especially while you're able to take advantage of your time and youth, and that these activities don't need an end goal. It's kind of scary to only try to pick things that you think you'll be good at or think that you'll do well at, and it can be scary and paralyzing, especially for people who are perfectionists, to not take these risks and not really end up ever trying anything new. And these things like art and athletics can engage your brain in different ways that are not like academics. While I do think it's really beneficial to do all these other extracurriculars that are applicable in many different ways, it's also kind of a similar muscle in your brain versus using athletics. It's like somewhere where you learn how to prioritize yourself, your health and your body, and actually taking care of yourself. And I know a lot of high school and college culture, it can be like, it's a stressful culture, and sometimes people brag about how little sleep they get, which can be dangerous. And so, yeah, I think that pursuing these activities without an end goal and without fear of consequence is what leads to to exploration and this feeling of play. And parents can really help cultivate this by not pressuring students. And my parents never did, but I think for me it was more pressure on myself and like from peers, seeing peers doing all these extracurriculars, but I didn't have time outside of high school to do debate or do newspapers. So I kind of did it more through taking these engineering classes, but in the end, I think that they weren't as beneficial as I had imagined. And I think that also this relates to what Lee was saying. And I think exploring something outside of what you think you would be good at is really important. Also just exploring interests and maybe not necessarily what you think you want to do in the future. Now that I'm in college, I spend a lot more time reading and just listening to podcasts and reading articles and trying to read books, though there's a lot less time. And I've noticed that a lot of my most enjoyable classes are actually from outside my major, which is in environmental engineering. But these classes like social inequality, and I took another class called Intergroup Dialogue Project, which I'm now going to be facilitating this upcoming semester, taught me things like concrete communication skills, and also sparked interest in other fields like sociology. And sociology is also something that intersects with the environmental field and how we are in a climate crisis. And I think that there's a lot of intersection, and the world is becoming more interdisciplinary. So unless you know in high school that, oh, you want to be going into corporate banking or whatever, again, this goes back to just learning for fun and learning without an end goal, because along the way, somewhere things will start to connect. And if it doesn't, you still learn something else. So yeah, I think all in all, just exploring things outside of what you think you'll be good at, and whether it's for fun and for pleasure, those are all really important. And lastly, I just want to relate to emphasize what Jackie was saying about health, and also Lee. I think every student here, I'm sure, like has been told that prioritizing their mental health and their bodies is really important. And I think that for parents, it can be helpful to model this for ways that you want to support your child. It's really, I understand that a lot of our parents are immigrants and that they've given so much to be here, and it can be hard to, you're used to giving everything your all, but sometimes you also need to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. You need to be, the actions you do need to be sustainable, and kind of, it's hard to do anything else if you're not doing well emotionally or mentally. And sometimes that means seeking professional help, and sometimes that just means being vulnerable and talking through your feelings, because feelings are important. So yeah, I think those are my main points, and I'm happy to answer any other questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for sharing those great points. Again, mental health. And I felt as parents, you mentioned a point of create environments where mistakes are okay. It's super important, because we tend to be perfect, right? We want our children to be perfect. And sometimes when we grow up, our parents required us to be perfect. If you're not getting 100, it's very, very bad. So I grew up in this kind of family. And it's so important to create an environment to allow children to make mistakes. I once listened to a podcast by one of the Fortune 500 CEOs. So she mentioned that in her family, they value mistakes and failures. She said when she was young, family dinner, Sunday dinner, her dad would go over the table, ask her and all her siblings, have you made a mistake this week? have you experienced any failure this week? If the answer is no, he would say, why? Because to him, if the children stop making mistakes, that means they stop growing, they stop to be creative, they stop to take risks. So I feel that the parents has more responsibility of creating an environment so that we're allowed to make mistakes. It's so important, and look forward to hearing more from you at the panelist session. Thank you. Our next speaker is Jessica. And last, but our youngest speaker, Jessica. And Jessica is an incoming freshman at the University of Pennsylvania. She will be majoring in political science and economics. While studying at Newton North, Jessica was ranked the #1 female debater in Massachusetts. She also served as the head captain of Newton South debate team. Well, we have a lot to hear from Jessica, so please join me welcoming Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. And yeah, I'm really glad that I get the chance to share a little bit about my high school experience. So I guess I'll just get straight into it. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is the value of challenging yourself. And the biggest example of that in my own life was joining debate. When I was in middle school, I never really thought of myself as the type of person who was really confident or even interested in doing an activity where you just kind of argue with people. I had a lot of friends who were like, oh, I love arguing with my parents. I'll be so good at it. And I was always like, I would never be good at debate. I would suck. Like, I just don't have the ability to do that. But I ended up actually joining debate on a whim, and I am so glad I did because it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I would say that debate is not for everyone, but for me, it was like the perfect challenge that I needed. And I think it taught me a lot about not only just like public speaking, and it gave me confidence, but also I feel like I learned so much about the world and just about like issues as a whole. And I just think that it doesn't have to be debate for everyone, but you should always try to do something out of your comfort zone that you may not expect yourself to do. And if it doesn't end up working out, that's not really an issue. But if it does end up working out, it could be one of the best decisions you've ever made. It could allow you to discover a lot of new passions. And especially for like younger high school students, I don't know if anyone is one of those here. Being like a freshman or sophomore is always a really great time to do that. And kind of like what Lee said, it's never really too late to try something new. And even if it doesn't end up being your main activity in high school, I feel like you can actually get a lot out of it. I had a friend who didn't join debate until junior year, and he didn't end up being like the best debater, but I feel like he told me that he got a really great experience, and it was also just really fun for him. So yeah. And I think just like as a caveat, I think that Jackie also mentioned the importance of like public speaking and just being able to kind of communicate with other people. It's not something I put on the slideshow, but I just think that everyone should learn that, whether or not that's through debate or just kind of spending some time practicing and learning about that. I think it's like one of the most important life skills no matter what you do, and it'll get you so much further than just kind of like taking a class will. The second main thing that I wanted to talk about is doing what you love and what you're really passionate about. I feel like for a lot of Asian families, there's a pressure to fit a certain mold, aka like be very interested in STEM or like become a doctor and stuff like that. And for me, science is never something I liked. Like I literally am so bad at it. And for me, it was a little scary to kind of tell my mom that I wasn't really interested, well, mom and dad, that I wasn't really interested in that topic. And for me, classes like English and history were always way more interesting, and I was way better at them. And I think that when I finally accepted that, that's when I really started being good at things. I think it's important to have a basic understanding of all subjects, and especially for, I guess, college applications, that's something that's important. You still need to do well in all your classes, but I would really suggest that if you really enjoy something, put a lot of time and effort into it, even if it doesn't fit a certain mold. Something that I did was volunteer on a lot of political campaigns and internships over the summer. I'm working on a campaign right now, and I don't think that fit my parents' mold of like what I guess their like child would be like, but it's something that I really enjoy doing, and I'm really glad that I am putting the time into that. The third thing that I wanted to talk about is the importance of making connections and bonding with your teachers and classmates. I think that a lot of students see going to school and attending classes kind of just as like something you have to do to get into college, or it's just like, I'm going to learn the content and do on the test and like not pay attention or just like move on with my life. But I think what makes high school actually enjoyable is having those bonds with your teachers and your classmates. In my experience, the teachers at Newton South have been really good on the most part. And I've had some teachers who I will still talk to like in the next year or next few years because they left such a big impact on me. And also, I think that there's a lot of value in getting to know your classmates instead of just kind of sitting in class and not really like reaching out to anyone. I think having classmates just can also help you become a better student, or having classmates that you're close with can help you become a lot of a better student, but also just in general, make school a lot more enjoyable. And when school's enjoyable, you tend to just do better in school as well. And just kind of adding on to that, I think that everyone should make time to spend time with friends outside of just an academic setting. I definitely did that, but one of my regrets from high school is not doing that more. I think that having that time to relax and decompress is so important, especially because like when you're in school and you're doing all your extracurriculars and maybe sports on top of that, it's really, really hard to just kind of have a break. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about is just how to not really get discouraged in areas that you're not immediately good at. So I guess for me, one of my other regrets from high school is that in some of my classes, particularly like some of my harder math classes and like my chemistry class that I took, I got really discouraged when I just immediately wasn't good at something. And then as a result of that, I would fall behind in class and it would take me a lot of effort to like catch up to everyone. I think that whenever you fall behind in class or you're not immediately good at something, you should always kind of take the time to put the extra work in, and also just not really get discouraged. Like, know that if you reach out to people and you seek out help, people will probably help you and it'll be a lot easier. I think that for a lot of Asian students as well, when we're not immediately good at something, it's kind of like a shock, or like it's kind of hard to accept that like you're not the best at something. But I think it's a really big learning lesson and it'll help you overcome a lot of obstacles in the future as well. And I guess my final thing is I really wanted to emphasize what, I forgot who said it, but just the thing about mental health and how important that is. I feel like it's something that's not really talked about and it needs to be talked about more. And I think Asian parents can do a lot to help that, because for kids, it's sometimes hard to talk to their parents about it and bring it up out of nowhere because it's just kind of a topic that no one discusses. But if parents can actively do their part in bringing it up and asking if they can help in it in any way, like, oh, sometimes do you need a day off? Or is there anything I can do for you? Can I cook like your favorite meal? Just like anything, even the smallest gesture can be really helpful. And I think that's so important. So yeah.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing so many good points. Another topic on the mental health. Looks like it's an important topic. So many of our panelists mentioned about that. I also, there's so many panelists where you're into speech and debate. It is such an important skill. As you mentioned, Jessica, it's no matter what you do in your life, you can be serving food in McDonald's, or you can be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. It is important to be able to talk, really, to communicate effectively. As an adult at my company, when I work for the company I work for, when we hire people, not necessarily technical skill might not be the number one skill. Of course, we need to hire someone with technical skills, but you do need the person to have a basic communication skills, because the thing is, we always say, my boss or the senior management always say, well, some technical skills, they can learn. You can just send them like 3 months or 6 months of training, take some courses, crash courses, and they'll be good at it. But public speaking skills takes years to build, and it takes effort. So I'm so glad you're doing that. And since we're on that topic, I know we have lots of parents in the audience. I always advertise that as a parents, we should not only send our children to to do public speaking or to learn better. So the parents also need to work on their own public speaking skills because you also have a career to do that. Oh, well, so now with this, we finished all the panelists discussion, and we're going to start with to answer the questions. And Jian, would you like to share your feedback or survey results or?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Okay.
And can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. The panelists just had such a wonderful and brilliant discussion. I believe our audience has received a tremendous value from your sharing. So let's move to our next part. I want to take the opportunity to thank all the parents and high schoolers to take part in the survey we provide during past few days. 首先我感谢参与调查问卷的所有的朋友们。你们宝贵的反馈呢，给了我们很好的想法去组织这次活动。然后因为时间的关系，我不能够把你们所有的问题都提出来，让我们的 panelists 来回答。那么我就选择性的提4个问题，好不好？第一个问题呢，一位家长是这样问的，他说，how to choose your prospective school and how do you know it fits you? Anyone wants to answer the question?
I can take this one.
Great.
So I guess you could say I go to a very niche school. It's a very small, like 2,200 person, historically women's college, very close to my house. It's about 5 miles away from where my parents live. But when I was starting kind of the college process, I was super lost, right? So I was like, I don't know if I want to go to a big school or a small school. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to study. And this is totally normal. A bunch of my friends were also kind of stuck in the same boat. And even after I had gone on a couple college visits to like a whole like variety of different schools, I was still like, I don't know. I'm just going to apply to some here or there and then see where the cards fall. But in the end, I really realized that I liked the small community that we have at a small college. So my high school, Newton North, is actually really big for a high school. It's about 2,000 people. And my college is about the same size, although between high school and college, it's a little different because the campus is bigger and people are spread out among more academic buildings. But I think for me, looking back, going to Wellesley is like a really good fit for me personally, just because I really like making really tight connections in small community groups with people. And you can really find that in a small college setting. And also, I guess I'll pub going to a historically women's college if anyone is interested in that. When I was applying to college, I never thought, oh, I definitely want to go to a women's only college. I was open to going to really anywhere. But for me, what I found has been really valuable is that it's very, I think you have an opportunity to really grow in your own sort of woman-focused setting. So for example, I guess like an example like I like to use is in high school, I took AP chemistry, and I remember this would happen a lot in a lot of like the math and science classes, where a lot of the boys would kind of feel like they maybe were smarter through whatever societal programming they had received, and they would feel more confident maybe than the girls to do the lab experiments. So if we had to do like a titration or something, the boys would say, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do the fun part and like pour all these different liquids together, right? And then they would turn to the girls and they would say like, oh, like, do you mind taking notes? Do you mind being the scribe? And they would say something like, oh, you're a girl, so your handwriting is better, right? And I'm kind of going on a little bit, but this is just to say, like, I think historically women's colleges are a place where women can really have space to just simply take up space and exist and not really have to worry about that sort of competition that you might find in maybe a co-ed school. And so I really appreciate that. And I think it gives a lot of STEM students at Wellesley a chance to become more confident and empowered in their abilities and skill set. So yeah.
Very helpful, Jackie. So any other comments from our other panelists?
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. So my
Great,
situation, so I had applied to a program called, it was at University of Pittsburgh, and it was one of those 8-year accelerated medical programs, because I am currently pre-med and interested in being a doctor in the future. What those programs do is you are admitted to the undergraduate college. I think Brown has one as well. And with your undergraduate admittance, you are also admitted to the medical school in the next 4 years, which means that you don't have to apply to medical school. You don't have to take the MCAT. You don't have to go to interviews. You don't have to wait, spend a lot of money on the whole medical school application process, which if you're pre-med sounds incredibly attractive. So when the time came around for high schoolers to decide, I was choosing between this program at University of Pittsburgh and Harvard. And I was really, really torn, because on one hand, you have incredible job stability. If you go to University of Pittsburgh, you basically have your entire life laid out for you. You don't have to worry about, any testing. You have everything set for you, which is incredibly attractive. And, I found it very hard to turn down. However, the reason why I did so was because, for me at least, number one, I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to go to med school. But number two, I think the more and more I learn about myself through college is that, for me, an interdisciplinary liberal arts education has been one of the most valuable experiences I've had here at my school. So, for example, I think had I gone to University of Pittsburgh, I would have just taken all the science classes and then just graduated, been happy and everything. But I think what's really great about going to a liberal arts college is that it promotes exploration. It promotes you through the divisional distribution requirements and everything. And it promotes you exploring things that you never would have thought were interested. And you can also see how specific things affect science, for example. You can see how inequalities in race and gender still affect science to this day, as what Jackie said. And I think that has been one of the main tenets of liberal arts education that I have personally benefited from. For example, I never thought that I would really be interested in, studying anything relating to the humanities. But actually, in fact, I took a class for history out of kind of boredom and because I was required to, and now I'm pursuing a secondary field in it. And I think that had I gone to another more selective, more focused school, I don't think I would have been able to do so. Now, if you go to these schools, does that mean you're not going to receive a liberal arts education? No, I don't think so. I think that you'll be perfectly fine and you will come out as a fully fledged human being. But I think in terms of considering what college to go to, maybe let yourself explore a little bit. I think if for me at least, if I had gone to Pitt, I would have just stayed the path and everything. But I think that going to a college that didn't have a specific purpose, that wasn't pre-professional, allowed me to explore and has allowed me to grow as a human, both academically and personally.
Thank you so much for such a helpful and meaningful suggestions to a lot of the audience. I think in particular for high schoolers at this stage, so I think you guys already experienced the choices. And to me, maybe to summarize what you guys already shared is really understand what you yourself are most motivated or what really interests you best. And then you spend quite some time to learn the school culture to see whether it best fits your interest and your future pursuit. Any other comments? Otherwise, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move to the second question. Okay, so then let's move to the second question. What do you think about spending lots of time on learning Chinese? I guess you guys all know why I picked this question, because we are all from Chinese family, I believe so, or at least the majority of the audience today are from Chinese family. So
I can, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, sorry. I can speak to that. I am very grateful for my parents. Just something they did was they made speaking Chinese just kind of like routine. And I think just like at home, we kind of just like from early on, like there was an expectation that just at home we would speak Chinese, and then like outside we could speak English. And really just like, I think for parents of younger children, that's a great idea of just like creating an environment just to encourage Chinese speaking. But also like later on, as I mentioned, like it's not too late to start anything. And New South and New North offer great Chinese programs that like can really help you like kind of like learn Chinese. And just like for me personally, like at first, like in high school, like in middle school, I was kind of like embarrassed about speaking Chinese all the time to my parents. I was like, can we just speak English or something? But I think as time went on, and I just really realized like the value of speaking to my parents, like, and kind of just like having that connection to kind of like my roots. So definitely like whether it is speaking from a young age or taking classes, I highly recommend speaking Chinese. It's just like a way of connecting to your past.
Yeah, I just want to add on, I really totally agree. I also went to like the Indian Chinese language school, and I mean, at the time it was not enjoyable, but now I really appreciate having this skill. And I think that I have friends who grew up in multilingual households, but either their language didn't really stick with them when they grew up, or they didn't really speak it at home, even though their parents had that ability. Usually they kind of regret like not having picked up that language. Yeah, I think practice is key. Just a funny story. My brother is actually a native, like was born in China, but my parents were really nervous about him learning English when they moved to the U.S. and just spoke a lot of English with them. And now my Chinese is a bit better than him. Yeah.
Wow, cool, Amy, then. Yeah, so I think it's all about the balance, right? Because I could imagine the really heavy academic work in high school. And then for us as parents, on one hand, we really want our kids know Chinese culture and know the roots of where they are from, and to really understand their identity, Chinese identity. But in the meantime, we wouldn't like them to feel overwhelmed by the school works. So I guess you guys already really well addressed this question to the parents.
Kind of going off of that, actually, I think like it doesn't necessarily always have to be sort of in an academic setting that you're learning Chinese. For example, when I was little, my dad used to like pretend that he couldn't understand me when I spoke in English.
Yeah.
So I was not forced to speak Chinese, but I was encouraged to. But even then, it doesn't always have to be just going to Chinese school or taking that class in your high school, your public high school. But it can also just be maybe you're watching like a movie or a TV show with a friend and you both want to like practice your Chinese, or you want to listen to like a song. And I think those can also be valuable experiences too.
To add on, coming from the other side of someone who is terrible at Chinese, I think that is one of my biggest regrets. I wish my parents had forced me to continue Chinese school. And I think that like in college, I'm taking Chinese because I want to get better at it. But yeah, I would highly recommend even if your kid is crying, just drag them to Chinese school. Doesn't even matter. Like I would do that. Like I kind of wish my parents just like kept dragging me, because right now, like that's like one of the biggest regrets in my life is not being able to read and write Chinese or speak it very fluently at all.
Yeah, I agree so much. Actually, Ella and I were just talking about this, but yeah, that's also one of my biggest regrets, and that's also why I'm taking Chinese in college. I think for me though, like Chinese school was never enjoyable. I still had to do it, but like I feel like my parents were too nice and spoke English with me a lot. So then we just got in the habit of speaking English. Oh my God, they're watching. But if they had actually like spoken to me in Chinese more, I think I definitely would be better at it now. So.
Okay, so then I'm encouraging all the moms here in the audience to be tiger moms, okay? But only on learning Chinese. Okay, let's move to our final question. I decided to drop off one question, which to me, I will leave a surgeon for the questions we collected from after our discussion before the meeting from the team members. The last question I would like to ask is, what are you planning to do after college?
I can try answering that, maybe. Honestly, like when you get to college, you ask your friends, and like a lot of people are just like pretty lost. And same with me, like there's definitely like a lot of uncertainty. Should I go this way? Should I get a job? Should I go to grad school? Yeah, there's a lot of choices in college. It's definitely daunting, but kind of so far, I think my current plan is just I'm really interested in doing a lot of like math related public health stuff, to kind of combining like stats, math, and then like kind of like epidemiology, like clinical trial stuff. So I'm really interested in maybe, I don't know, going off to grad school, maybe a master's, PhD in like biostats. So currently that's the plan, but I have 2 more years of school, so things could change.
Lee, I really enjoy one of the points during the discussion. You mentioned it's okay to get a bit lost, but just explore meaningful. Just make sure you explore meaningfully.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I also have no idea what I'm doing next year, and I mean after I graduate, which is very soon. A little scary, but I think that I would like most to be working in a field that relates to climate and the environment, but also how it relates to people, and especially cities and urban areas. I think there's a lot of work to be done in climate resiliency and kind of climate justice, and how that ties in with how society functions and like the inequality structures of our society. A lot of what I'm learning in class is more technical and kind of like, how do we clean up these messes that happen? How do we clean up water? How do we clean up air? And I would like to work in a field that takes more initiative and works on preventing these things from happening in the first place, and also just how do we adapt for the climate change that will be coming no matter what.
Thank you for sharing with us, Amy. I think this is so true. When we were at this age, we certainly don't have a clear idea about what exactly the job you want to do. You just give yourself enough patience to explore, and until you find something you think that you really love to do. I think it takes time. Just give yourself plenty of patience. Opportunity always gives to those people who are well prepared. So, surgeon?
Thank you, Diane. Thank you for
Let's move to our,
and summarize these. Okay, so we also have another long list of questions that we have the panelists reviewed. So there are several categories: academics, extracurriculum activities, college application, time management, social media and gaming, parent relationships, mental health and well-being, and others. So I'm just going to pick some questions. The first one is that what AP courses did you take and what GPA is considered to be good enough to apply to your school? I had Jessica and Ellen sign up. Would you like to comment more on this?
Yeah, I guess I can go first. So during high school, I took AP Statistics, AP US History, AP BC Calculus, AP Literature. Sorry, I've been out of school for a while, so I'm forgetting. AP Environmental Science. What else did I do? Oh, AP Comparative Government, AP US Government, AP Spanish, and I might be forgetting. Oh, and I self-studied AP Micro and AP Macroeconomics. I did them like in my sophomore year. We weren't really allowed to take APs unless we like skipped levels in math, which I didn't do. So I self-studied those economics courses by myself. But in my junior year, I took just 2 APs. In my senior year, I took all APs. But I feel like the APs in senior year aren't really that difficult. So it's just kind of like what you're used to by that point. So it's not really that challenging. I don't really know how helpful that was, but I also think that, I guess going to the GPA question, I don't really know like the exact number because I don't really know college admissions that well, but I think that as long as you're getting like pretty solid like A-ish range grades, like you should be good. I just think that what's more important is that you're challenging yourself, taking high level classes and generally doing well in them. You don't have to have like an A in every single class, but obviously the more A's, I guess, the better, but just don't put too much pressure on yourself to have like a perfect GPA because like literally one person out of like 500 people in your grade has that, and it's not like that attainable. So you don't need to pressure yourself that much to have it. So yeah.
Yeah, just to reiterate Jessica's point, I'm a tour guide at Harvard, and what we like to say is, you know, we're looking for people who are challenging themselves academically, taking the highest level of classes that are possible and doing reasonably well in them. But there is no like set point. There's no like, if you have above whatever GPA, then like they'll like look at you. There's no specific cutoff GPA that colleges are looking for. It's you're viewed as a whole person. You're viewed in conjunction with your personal statement and your extracurriculars and all the other activities that you're doing, as well as the rest of your essays. So while GPA is important, it's really rather a minimal factor when it's looked at everything else. But for me, it's been a while, but I'll recall the best I can. In sophomore year, I took AP Statistics. And then in junior year, I took AP BC Calculus, I took AP Chemistry, and I took AP US History. And then in senior year, like Jessica, I did take all APs. So I took AP Government, AP Bio, AP Physics, Mechanics, AP Physics, Electricity and Magnetism. I did multivariable calculus, and then I did AP English Language and Composition, or just a fancy word for English class, basically. But yeah, again, like Jessica, it's once you get up to the higher levels, it's really not too much of a challenge. So you're able to handle the workload very effectively.
Thank you, Ellen, Jessica. Lots of AP courses. Wow, so impressive. Thank you. Okay, our next question is, what made you select your major? When did you realize what you want to study? Was it through some extracurriculum activities? I have Lee selected a question.
Yeah, so I kind of select this question just because I actually changed majors, sort of like I had a major switch. For a lot of people, like it's definitely okay to not really know what you want to study. Like not everyone's gonna be like come out of the womb and be like, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm taking biology. Like that doesn't really happen. So for me, when I was applying in high school, I did FBLA, which is Future Business Leaders of America. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I was like, I'm going to do business then, go to Wall Street or go somewhere else. And so that's where I started. So I started doing like business stuff, econ stuff. But I think as I started taking courses, as I like did clubs and stuff, I realized it wasn't really a good fit for me. So I was sort of just like thinking about what might fit me better. And at the same time, I was actually taking a couple math classes. So I was doing multivar and then I was doing linear algebra. And I enjoyed those classes a lot. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll do more math related things. And that's kind of how I went down applied math. And sort of even more during applied math, I was still a little bit lost. I was like, okay, I know all this math now. What can I do with the math? And so I was talking with professors. I was talking to different labs and stuff. And that's how I kind of found out about like biostats, bioinformatics, and that area. And this is kind of where I'm going now. So definitely it's okay if you're not too sure what you want to major in, just kind of explore meaningfully and just, it's okay. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, I'm going to move on to extracurriculum activities. The first question is, could you tell us what activities you participated during high school summers? I have Ellen and Jackie.
I can go first. So I think I mentioned this already, but in high school summers, I went to debate camp for a little bit, but most meaningfully, I worked at Tufts Medical Center in my sophomore year doing research investigating the CDK4 gene on cancer cells. And then in my junior year, I worked at BU and produced a research poster about the effects of a drug that my lab was developing on these cancer drugs.
I can go next. So yeah, in like middle school and high school, I was really interested in the bio classes that I took. So I kind of looked for opportunities sort of related to that. So kind of like what I said earlier, the research project that I worked on one summer with the professor from Wellesley, and I did that with a friend. So it ended up being like very fun and really nice to collaborate with someone who I had like a strong positive connection with. And that was really great. And I also had a chance to do a poster session later on. And there was another summer where I was working at the Museum of Science in Boston, if anyone's been there. It's really great. Basically, I worked as a volunteer in the Hall of Human Life. So if anyone's ever seen like people in red lab coats doing like science demos in there, that was the kind of job that I did. And I really loved it. And I got to talk to museum visitors all the time. And it was like really cool demos. Like we would dissect cow eyeballs and then show people like sheep brains. And yeah, that was a really great opportunity. And I think they're open to middle schoolers and high schoolers, but I really loved doing that job, and it actually kind of informed a lot of my interests now in college. So I've been really interested in science communication lately, and sort of how to take really complex topics and make them into more like accessible, understandable ideas for sort of everyone, even if you're maybe not a science major. And that's recently gotten me into more bio classes that are related to like data science and programming and sort of visualizing data. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, it all really started early on in high school. So I would say definitely going back to that point of like, do what you're passionate about. It will yield good results.
Thank you both. Then it looks like your high school summer activities really helped you to choose what to study in college. That's really important. Like where do you find those opportunities? Is it through school or through some website?
So for me, I found my opportunity at Tufts Medical School through a family friend, and very much enjoyed that. And for my BU program, I found that I think I just like Googled science internships for high schoolers. I believe, I think that that's how I found it. But I think it's really useful in terms of advice to look on the internet, but also come to these panels, hear what other people have to say, and talk to students who have done this before, talk to any family friends you may know. And there's a lot more opportunities out there than you think. And I think communicating with older students who have gone through this process before is definitely a really helpful way to figure out what sort of opportunities exist out there.
Absolutely, thank you. So the next question is, what extracurricular activities were you involved in during the school year? I would say probably high school years. I have Jackie and Jessica.
Yeah, so I guess circling back, this kind of connects to the points that I was talking about earlier with being on the track team and the swim team and the newspaper. I kind of look back on my high school experiences more fondly because of these groups that I was part of. I think someone said earlier that like, it's kind of like less about what you get out of taking a class and maybe more about what you're learning sort of in your connections with other people while you're in school, which I definitely find true. I think if you sort of focus more on developing sort of your interpersonal skills or maybe getting along with other people, you know, it matters more probably that you come out of high school a person who is like good and kind and compassionate, like a lot of panelists were saying, than if you remember how to like, I don't know, if you remember anything from your like AP BC Calc class, you know, like I think I made a lot of great friends who I still talk to today on a lot of these teams, and I learned a lot of life skills about how to take care of myself and learning about sort of how I work, which kind of in terms of like work ethic can connect to your academic achievements as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I really agree. I think that it's really important to get involved in a lot of extracurriculars during high school. Not all of them have to be like academic. Like one of the best experiences for me in high school was playing on volleyball. I was on varsity volleyball my sophomore year and it was super fun. I unfortunately didn't have enough like time to juggle that with everything else, but I still think it was like a really great experience. It was so much fun and I like don't regret doing it at all. But during high school, like I said earlier, my main thing was debate, but the other two clubs I put a lot of time into were class office, which is basically our Newton South like student government kind of. And we kind of planned a lot of events and stuff like that. And I started a chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union at Newton South, and that was really enjoyable as well. So yeah.
That's excellent. And Jackie, you've done your track team, swim team, newspaper editor. I wonder how you manage your time. But I do have a question on time management later, so probably invite you to talk. Okay, so moving on to college application. I have a question. What do you suggest high school students do each year to prepare for a college application? I have Lee sign up for this question.
Yeah, I just have like a couple like little tidbits. I feel like most of this session has like we've definitely covered a lot, but I think just like maybe one or two things you can do is just first take your time, just like think about what you're interested in. As Ellen and Jackie mentioned, just like explore your interests through like your summers as well as during the school year. Second thing, get to know your teachers. Just like really try to like put yourself out there. Kind of whether it's you're like a freshman, sophomore, or a junior or senior, it's just good to know your teachers. Also, like it's great for like rec letters, but also just great for enhancing what you're learning in the classroom. So those are just two tidbits. We cover a lot, and yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important to bond with your teacher. I think one of the panelists did mention bond with the teacher and students. It's really important. Okay, I have another one. When to take SAT and ACT? I have Jessica signed up for this question.
Yeah, so I think that if possible, you should take or I guess start studying for the SAT or ACT as early as you can. I think that the test is really stress inducing just because like you never know how it's going to go, and obviously everyone thinks, and it is a big part of your college application. So I forgot the specific test dates, but I think if you can possibly do this, I would suggest starting to study for the SAT this summer before your junior year and trying to take it before like December of your junior year the first time. And if you need to retake it, that means you actually have a little extra time this spring, which is exactly what I did. I find that for a lot of my friends who didn't start studying until the middle of their junior year, if they didn't do well on their first SAT in like March, they were super, super stressed out. And I'm not sure what's happening for like this year of college applications because everything's so different, but there's also SAT subject tests, which a lot of like higher level colleges ask for. And if you are planning on taking those, you also kind of need to make time to study for that and take those tests. So getting your SAT or ACT out of the way as soon as possible will give you more time to study for those tests if you want to take them, and make sure you can do as well as possible on that. So yeah.
Thank you, Jessica. That's very good suggestions, especially for families like us. We're just my daughter's going to high school, so these are the very good lessons. Thank you. Okay, time management. Looking back to your high school life, what time management suggestions do you have? I have Lee and Ellen.
Yeah, so as I kind of glossed over during my introduction, I learned this the hard way, but I learned skills. So first thing I learned really that worked for me is just like writing things down. I keep with myself just this like little notebook here that I just write everything I can on it. So really it helps me just like whenever I have a big assignment, it helps me to kind of like break things down and just gotta like kind of break it down to pieces so it's not as daunting. Kind of when you're working with kind of doing little things versus just like one huge project, you're more likely to kind of like start knocking out the little things. And it's just a great way of just like keeping track visually of like what you need to get to. And you can also do the same thing online. I know a lot of computers have like calendar apps and like reminders apps, and you can do the same thing there. Also, another thing I recently learned is something called the Pomodoro technique. It's this time management technique where basically you like, there's those things called like cycles, like Pomodors, and you basically spend 25 minutes working, just focusing, laser focused, and then you get like 5 minutes of rest. And you kind of just repeat that for 4 cycles. And after 4 cycles, you can take like a longer break, or you can like stretch, use the bathroom, whatever. And just like keep repeating that until you get like what you need to get done. And it's been super helpful. Like sometimes I just don't want to read a paper. I don't want to like do a problem set or anything. And just like kind of zoning in, starting with the Pomodoro technique. And I'm like, okay, my 25 minutes start now. I'm gonna write this code. I'm gonna read this paper, whatever. It has really like helped me just like jump right in and just like kind of knock out those things I've been putting down like piece by piece. But as always, your mileage may vary. Some people might work with the Pomodoro technique, some people might not, but really just about exploring and just like seeing what works.
Yeah, similar to Lee, I also have like my notebook in which I write everything down. I think that one of the most important things about, I guess, being like productivity in general, not just time management, is actually translating your life from a digital platform into a handwritten platform. I think, I mean, in terms of school and everything, when you're taking notes by hand, when you're crossing things off physically, you actually establish a better, I think it's like a better mind-body connection. And you're actually able to remember things better when you're studying for a test, when you're reviewing material, when you're making your to-do lists. You are just more in connection with what the tasks and activities that you have to do when you write it out and you establish, those, when you use your muscles and like physically to do those things. So I found that that's incredibly helpful for me. I also sometimes use the Pomodoro method, which has been helpful. But in college, I found that I actually enter these like states of just like extreme concentration for about like 3 or 4 or 5 hours at a time, where I don't like really move or anything, where I just am able to concentrate on one thing completely until I'm done with that. So whenever that happens, I always make sure my phone is away, make sure there's no distractions around, have my water bottle and everything, and then I just put in my earphones and study. But in terms of managing time in high school, I used a planner. I did a lot of things after school, and I always had my weekends busy. Like, for example, on Sundays, I would go to church until 12, and then right after 12, I'd go to orchestra from 12 to 6:30. So I had no time on Sunday to do homework. And then on Saturday, I would have debate tournaments. So I'd always make sure to, where you get back at like 11:30. So I would always make sure to finish my homework after school when I got back, which would be like around 8 p.m., finish it by 11, try to get in bed, because if I'm not busy, I will procrastinate everything. So I think that that's one of my tips, is also to stay busy. But again, I think I mentioned this earlier, take whatever time you have. If you're driving in your parents' car, you can be studying during that time. I mean, also allow yourself a moment to relax and everything. But for me, when I didn't have time, I was studying in between classes, or I was like finishing my homework when I was eating lunch sometimes, because I knew I didn't have time to do it after school, or I would do it on my breaks during tutoring, or I'd think of a problem or be studying in my head while I was driving home, or I'd record myself speaking and like reading my notes, and then I'd play that as I walked to the bus stop or as I walked home from school. So yeah, I'm one of those people that actually needs to study a lot to do well on exams. So I think that for me, studying as much as possible and fitting all that in has been very helpful for me to succeed in my classes.
I just want to add really quickly, I know we're running short on time. Setting a bedtime was really helpful, and like Ellen mentioned earlier, like the law of diminishing returns, sometimes staying up later isn't always going to produce quality work. So having like a deadline that night, and also just being okay with knowing that you're prioritizing your work, and yeah, setting a bedtime helps.
Yeah, just to jump off on that, I feel like this is a really big part of high school too, to make sure you get enough sleep. I think I learned this the hard way, as a lot of people do early on in high school, where you're like, oh, I have so much to do and I'll just stay up late and finish it all. But then you wake up in the morning and you're so tired, and then you don't really absorb everything that's happening in class. And then you end up having more work to catch up on because you didn't get enough sleep. And so as high school kind of progressed, I got a little better at that. And in college, at this point, I'm arguably doing more work than I was maybe in high school in terms of like maybe my course load. But I find that I'm getting 8 hours most nights in college, and it's really nice. Like, you wake up, you don't feel like a zombie, you can get your work done. And sometimes in high school, it felt like it was easier said than done, right? Because you have this huge to-do list, you don't know how you're going to finish it. But if you just put everything down and say, if my homework isn't really done by 11 o'clock, that's okay. I'm going to get a good night's sleep tonight so that I can tackle everything else moving forward. Because honestly, like, nothing is so important that it comes before your physical health. So.
I think you're muted.
Okay, so let's move on. And something about social media and gaming. How do you deal with social media and other distractions like gaming? Any other potential distractions? I have Lee, and the other panelists are welcome to address this as well.
Yeah, I learned this the hard way as well. In freshman year, sophomore year, if you know me, I'm a big sports guy. Like, I love sports. And early on, I played Madden and FIFA. Long story short, my teams were very good. My grades, not so much. But from that, I really kind of learned ways to kind of it's very tempting. It's definitely very tempting because you want to play, you want to go on Facebook or wherever and just talk and whatever. So one thing that I've done a lot when I really need to focus is just like physically distancing myself from like my devices. So making it inconvenient for me to access my devices. So like, for example, with my phone, if I'm working, I would often like throw my phone on my bed or like put it downstairs. And that way, like if I ever want to check my phone, it'd just be like so physically inconvenient because I am many times a lazy person that I just like will stay in the computer and just like do my work. So that's one thing. Another thing is just like, I don't know, just kind of if you really need to, there are like certain like website blockers or stuff that like if you need to focus, just like block things. There's that as well. But honestly, it's very hard, it's very tempting. But one thing that has helped me is just like distancing myself from my distractions.
I can add on. I think that right now is an especially difficult time because since there's very little personal interaction, social media seems like the only way that you can have some semblance of like knowing what's going on in other people's life. So I don't think that anyone, if they enjoy social media and like have a presence there, I don't think anyone should delete it. But I think that during very stressful times, it can be helpful to deactivate your accounts. While I was applying to college, I like deactivated my like Instagram and Snapchat for like 3 months. And for me, that was a really good thing because I don't know, some people like obviously didn't take the process as seriously and were still hanging out with their friends a ton and stuff like that. And I don't know, I just didn't want to feel like I was missing out on anything. So deactivating was really helpful. But just during the normal school year, I tend to delete most of my social media apps from my phone and I just look at it on my laptop. It just helps me go on it less. I still don't ever think I should just like get rid of it because for me, like I think that's a very important way that I connect with people and just in general, like learn about information. But just making sure I'm not mindlessly checking it whenever just because I can is something that I think is really helpful to do for high schoolers and also just like at any age.
Oh, I think you may be muted
Yeah,
again.
sorry.
Wait, you're still muted.
Am I muted?
You're good now.
Good now. Okay. Yeah, some good suggestions. So physically distance yourself from devices. That's really good idea. Probably put the cell phone in a different room or upstairs, downstairs to do that. And Jessica's idea for temporary uninstall social media applications seems to be a good suggestion as well. Okay, let's moving on. Relationships with parents. Do you have any suggestions on how to communicate and handle relationship with your parents during high school? I have Amy and Jackie signed up. Of course, everybody else is welcome to comment on this.
Yeah, so I would just say to stay invested in your children, but also allow some degree of autonomy. I know like it's finding this balance that is really important because obviously your kids know that you care, but I think that like knowing even things like knowing who their friends are and like knowing what they enjoy doing in their free time really makes a difference. But at the same time, being like overly invested in your kids and can be kind of unhealthy. And also, I would suggest like modeling this healthy behavior as a parent. Like, do you equate your self-worth with your achievements? Or like knowing that what makes you a good person is not just about what work you do or how much money you make. Like what makes a good friend. And I'd also say just like, again, going back to being vulnerable, and someone else had mentioned like sharing your own stories. I think that's really important and really valuable for kids and your children to hear. Sometimes it can feel like you're just preaching advice and saying do this, do that, but it's really helpful for your children to understand where this is coming from, and that can help create a lot of empathy, and it feels less like unsolicited advice and more like, you know, I'm sharing a part of myself and this is why, like this is my experience, and it's a lot more engaging and helps you build your relationship. And I think that for me, a lot of like it's interesting. Like it's almost like a lot of my parents' struggles have been passed on to me, and sometimes that can be tough. But I think it also provides a sense of like self and grounding, like knowing where your roots come from, and yeah, and like what Jackie was saying, empowerment through your identity.
Yeah, I agree with Amy on basically everything she said. I think sort of having like not that I'm a parenting expert or anything, but in my experience, I've found that having sort of like a parent-child relationship where you're able to be sort of open and vulnerable about sort of things that you find maybe frustrating or kind of challenging can open up like a relationship where like me as a child can feel comfortable sharing my own sort of worries and struggles. And I think it's also important sort of for both students and parents to kind of establish that like while you're in high school, not everything you do has to be sort of for something, right? I think Amy kind of talked about this earlier. It doesn't have to be that like every action I do has to be productive, or every activity that I participate in is going to be something that goes on my resume or my college application. It's important, like not to make it systematic or anything, but it's important to set aside time to just have fun, to chill out. I mean, I'm sure like Lee, you probably love playing video games, right? Like it's important to once in a while have that time where you're like, okay, like I love doing this thing, so I'm going to make time for myself to do it. And I think this also plays into sort of like the mental health aspect where it's like you deserve to have time where you rest, right? You deserve to have that 5 minutes on your timer technique where you're just kind of like, I'm going to take a break because that's how I know I can come back and be even better as like a student or as an athlete. So yeah.
Just another thing I want to add on is that I think that a lot of Asian parents tend to shy away from being a friend of your kids. I know it's kind of ingrained in the culture of like Confucianism that, you know, a parent is an authority figure, someone to be respected. And I think all of those, you know, there's a balance, and obviously there should be respect both ways. But kind of serving more as a kind of like a counselor, I'd say. Like if a parent, sometimes they're too overbearing, it can be hard for kids to feel like they can open up, like others were saying. And that can lead to kind of like a rift. But if parents are able to show that support unconditionally, then it can just create a lot more of an easy relationship and just more mutually open.
Just to add on, yeah, like I think that is like the healthiest relationship. Like my mom and my dad are like, this kind of sounds sad, but like I swear I have friends my age, but they're like some of my best friends, and like I tell them everything, and like they tell me what goes on at work and everything. I think that becomes easier once your child becomes older and more mature. But I found that like, you know, my parents they like brought me into this world, and they are some of the wisest, smartest people I know. And I think that they're some of the best resources for advice in terms of like academics or like my friendships or everything. So I think that it's definitely worth trying to cultivate a friendly relationship with your children, because I mean, I love it. So.
Thank you. So lots of good suggestions. Yeah, it's important to really give space, right? I think the parents need to give some space to their children, and then the children need to give some space to their parents, and so be open, to be vulnerable. It's just so important. Just a quick time check. It's 9:32 now. So I have one more question on mental health and well-being. So should we continue, or what should we do? I just quick poll for the panelists.
I think, like you said earlier, this is a pretty important topic, and it seems like everyone
Okay, I'm going to go for it. So this one last question is, do you suggest students seeking mental health help and support? I have Amy and Jackie.
Yeah, okay, so first off, I think that if you think your child needs professional help, by all means, you should do that. There is a lot of stigma within the Chinese community around mental health and like showing weakness, or like someone is just like unwell and they're not going to get better. But I think that even if it's not in the form of professional help, it's just being able to talk about these things without fear of, I don't know, other people looking down upon you or like as a display of weakness. And I think for me, there was a time in my sophomore year of college where I was kind of sad, and I had been through like a major injury. I got surgery on my knee, and I wasn't able to do, everything was just so much harder, and just getting through daily life, and also I wasn't able to do gymnastics. And I just remember one of my teammates telling me, like, Amy, I know you had like all these things going for you in the past, like you were really good at gymnastics, it's now even hard to get to class, but you have you going for you. And it's just like having that inherent sense of self-worth, that's really important, and it's not easy to come by, but being able to grow this is really important. Yeah, I had some other points that I can't remember right now, so Jackie can, or anyone else can weigh in.
We'll come back. And Jackie?
Yeah, so I guess I ended up using a lot of my points today to talk about mental health, but I've said a lot of what I wanted to say. But yeah, what Amy has said is really important too, even if it's not to a point where maybe you feel like you're having mental health crisis or emergency. It's important to set aside time and check in with yourself and know kind of where you're at, and just like take a break and say, okay, maybe today wasn't that great. Maybe like during the pandemic, you might find yourself saying, oh, if I'm ever on Zoom for more than like 3 hours in a day, I get really cranky, I get really tired, I don't feel like myself. It's good to sort of check in with yourself on those points and say, like, what can I do to sort of improve my mental health? What can I do to just like make myself feel better?
I remember what I was going to say was that something my dad always says is health first, and I think a lot of parents also say that. And this includes not only your physical health, but also your emotional and mental well-being. And yeah, really just emphasizing strength through vulnerability. And there are like, you know, strengthening exercises, like I think even doing therapy, if that's accessible to you, not in a time of crisis, is a really good thing. And it's like doing physical therapy. Like you might not need it, but it can make you stronger. It makes your muscles stronger, and you could get by with taking ibuprofen, but doing these therapy exercises can really help. And so both training and resting. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to add more? I think we exhausted this topic today. Okay, great. With this, I finished all the questions, and so it's about 9:36 now. And then I want to return control back to Xiaoyi. So we will conclude the meeting.
OK， 好，现在时间有点晚了，但是我们上chat 的有几位也有问题还是请立松来给大家讲一下好吗 ？Host 立松。
好的，谢谢小易但是我想我们可以给大家说，这个时候已经过了我们预先设计的9点半，所以如果大家有需要有下线的话，完全没问题。Feel free to leave.
好。
We'll continue our discussion. If people prefer.
And also to add on, if our panelists, any of the panelists, if you need to leave, feel free to leave. It's already past 9:30. We appreciate your stay as well. Thank you. Okay, continue, Lisa.
Great, thanks. So in fact, Wendy asked a question about time management. I think we have covered that. Our panelists already addressed that. So I would like to help raise the following two questions from Michelle Zhang and from another anonymous parent. So the questions are, I think, for all panelists. First one, particularly for Jessica and Alan, how to improve your debate skills? And for Jessica, how to improve your volleyball skills as well? And then, yeah, let's address this question first, maybe. Jessica and Alan?
I think that this is a common theme for everything, but practice, practice, practice. You know, I think at least Newton South has a very prolific debate team, and they're always holding practices after school. So I think that this is the case for most things, but practicing is definitely one of the best ways to improve very quickly.
Jessica, you want to add something?
Can I add something?
I think she left. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, as a former speech captain, I feel like I must defend the speech part of speech and debate. Speech and debate, everyone loves talking about debate, but speech is just as good for developing your public speaking skills. I think one advantage that speech has over debate is really just the diversity. You can do kind of like, there's a lot of ways you can grow in speech. So one way you can do is just like, you can do like a lot of performative speech, a lot of acting, a lot of just expressing your emotions and feelings about something. And then there's more like debate oriented speech. So there's this one event called extemporaneous speaking. So you're given a public, kind of like a current events topic, and you're supposed to create a speech about it within 30 minutes and give it on the spot. So there's just a lot of variety. If your child is going to South, definitely recommend not only checking out debate, but also speech. But also going back, it's all about practice. You're going to practice in speech, you're going to be practicing in debate, and practice makes perfect.
Wonderful, thanks. So practice, practice, and practice, right? Okay, so the next question to Alan and whoever who has taken the AP Calculus, BC, AP Physics, AP Bio, etc. Is there a good place for students to receive tutoring out of the school? Or is in-school teaching enough for you to take these AP exams?
In my experience, I believe Newton South has an incredible teaching staff. I think the teachers who teach the AP courses are very, very skilled. So I think that, you know, it should be, at least I thought that it was fine. Actually, once you get into senior year, you realize that some colleges don't accept AP credits. So I actually never had to take my AP Bio exam. But for my other exams, the ones I took, I found that Newton South prepares you very well. But if you do want any extra supplements, you can always buy, I think it's Barron's comes out with AP prep books, as well as Princeton Review and Kaplan, I believe. And those are widely available through Amazon or through upperclassmen who have taken the classes before. But overall, your classes should be adequate preparation for you to succeed in an AP if you take it.
Yeah, I agree with Ellen. I feel incredibly lucky to have gone to school in Newton. It's probably one of the most well-funded public school systems in the entire country. And you just have so many resources, whether that's from the faculty or from your fellow peers, maybe if you form a study group outside of school. But also we had X Block. I don't know if South does this. Basically, it's like the school carves out time after school for teachers to be open. So it's basically this concept of office hours, but for high school. And for me, I utilize this a lot in high school. So basically teachers are just open, they're available in their office or their classroom. And if you have any questions, you can just drop by And I did this a lot, even if I didn't really have a question. Maybe I just wanted to start working on the homework and get started on it before maybe I had swim practice or something. Also a very good time management tip. But yeah, I think this allowed me to sort of develop relationships with my teachers where I felt like comfortable asking them questions outside of class, which led to me also raising my hand more in class. But it was a really great support system, and it allowed me also to feel less scared of asking questions, because I know a lot of time, maybe you'll be in a class and only 1 or 2 people will ask a question and everyone else might still be totally confused, but feel too like embarrassed to raise their hand or tell people that they don't know something like really basic or like preliminary that the course had covered maybe a couple months earlier. But honestly, if you kind of let go of that embarrassment or shyness to raise your hand and say, hey, I actually don't know this thing. It doesn't mean you're not smart. It doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing. It just means that you're taking time to recognize what your weaknesses are and taking time to address them. So yeah.
Hey, this really gave us confidence, not just in the schools, but in ourselves. Thank you for being such wonderful role models for us. Okay, so there are no more questions in the chat section, but I think we can still open the floor up for audience for any live questions. Any question from the audience?
As Asian student.
Please feel free to unmute yourself or turn on your video.
I'd like to raise a question.
Great, thank you, Mandy.
This is for whoever is from Newton South or Newton North. How was the college counseling service from the schools? From Newton South and Newton North, both. I want to find out the school counseling service and the school counselors, how much can they help you in your college preparation, and what is the culture like?
Yeah, I can sort of answer to that. I went to Newton South. My guidance counselor was incredibly helpful with the whole college process. Really, she without her, I would have been struggling a lot. But basically, just whether it was talking about schools I was interested in applying to, or kind of talking about different exams and such, really just turning to kind of the in-school guidance counselor was really helpful in figuring out how to apply to colleges, what I should be doing, and kind of little tips and tricks to make the most of the process.
Yeah, I agree. Again, Newton Public Schools has a wealth of resources available to its students. And I know that the counselor to student ratio is really good at Newton North, probably the same for Newton South. But yeah, my guidance counselor was really great. He scheduled mandatory meetings with us to kind of talk about what our potential ideas were in terms of going to college, and also kind of what sort of deadlines you need to meet or guidelines. And he was really great and really supportive. And when I went back to my high school to visit, I think my first year of college, I went to his office and I was like, and we had a conversation and I was like, hey, thank you so much for helping me. You probably talked to me during one of the craziest times in my life, but you were so supportive and kind. So yeah, in my experience, they were really great.
I also want to find out, you have about more than 200 or 300 students in the class. How does each counselor handle all the students? How many students are assigned to each counselor?
I'm not quite sure about those statistics. But for the most part, I felt like my guidance counselor always had enough time for me. If I ever sent him an email saying, hi, I'm confused about this, do you have any time to meet? He would just send me his availability, which was great.
Let me add some my input. First of all, thank you all participants 5 wonderful students. I really learned a lot and well educated by you guys. Thank you. In terms of high school guidance counseling, my experience, because high school had a lot of courses, sometimes very complicated for parents to learn. And my first suggestion is always make an appointment with your child's high school counselor to introduce yourself and then to share a little bit your input about your child. And the first meeting normally it's courtesy visit. So being polite, being nice, say something good, and hopefully give the high school guidance counselor some good impression. And then tell him or her, say, if anything happens, how do I contact you? What's the best way? Email, phone call, personal visit? So that's very critical for especially for new families, the parents who just come here. So let me speak in Chinese. 在这里在座的家长，这一点很重要，和那个学校的 guidance counselor 呢建立一定关系，也可能你根本用不着这个关系。It's better to have a good relationship first。这样的话呢，有什么好的事情告诉学校的 guidance counselor。Tell good news first, and then if something happened, you call them, and normally they'll be a little bit more responsive. And the worst situation, you never contact them, never talk to them, and then something happened, you start complaining why you're not taking my child, and that's really, unfortunately, very bad relationship. So please, I know parents are being very busy. Most parents are full-time workers, but do that. That'll help a lot. I remember my son, when he was high school student, he did gymnastics, he was busy. I talked to his guidance counselor. And then junior year, there was book reward. And my son was chosen because why? The guidance counselor happened to know my son did a lot of other things. Otherwise, she will probably know, as Mandy just said, they might have 200 or 300 students. Normally, they don't know. So please do that. And that's very important to establish a good relationship with your child's guidance counselor. I know time is running out. Xiao Yi and Li Song.
There's one more. Thank you, Sen.
Okay, go ahead.
There's one more question here in the chat section. So from Yu Juan Yuan, the question is for Jessica Wu about how to apply for UPenn and Wharton particularly. Well, what's the difference in the application process and the admission standards for applying for UPenn and Wharton?
Jessica 可能下去了。
哦，
对，哪一位同学如果愿意回答的话，就
Yeah, will be hard.
I can answer because I actually thought about doing business schools. So I was looking at places like Wharton and like NYU Stern, and kind of basically, from my understanding, undergraduate business schools, they basically just like some schools are you would need to apply into the arts and sciences school, and then from there transfer into the business school. So schools that do that are like UC Berkeley. I believe there's a couple other schools that do that. And then there are other schools that are more direct admit. So those would be like Wharton, Stern, and those. So really it would be doing a lot of research. I think the best advice for people interested in undergraduate business schools is just to do business things. So a great thing to do is just whether you want to do like FBLA, DECA, these kind of high school business competitions, or you can also try like do like a lot of interning at local places. I know Newton has an intern program, but really just making sure you put yourself out there and kind of explore business in your own ways. But definitely there are undergraduate business schools. Look into the requirements, talk to the people there, and you should get a good idea of what to expect. But more or less, if you do well in high school and you demonstrate your interest in business, you should be good to go.
Right. Thank you, Lee. I know the time is almost 10. Everybody's tired. So maybe we'll try to aim for 10 p.m. We should close our discussion here. But there's one more question. Let's try to address it quickly, okay? So
yeah, I just suggest that that's the last question we're going to address, and then we're done. No more questions.
That's
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I have to leave right now, but thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
我想这样吧，因为Jessica 吴也下去了 ，Anna 要走，我也有点觉得依依不舍。那么我们今天非常感谢5位参加我们义工演讲的这5位同学，感谢你们的 passion， 你们的热情，对社区，对我们所有家长，对我们的孩子，你们的弟弟妹妹都是一种鼓励，非常感谢你们。以后可能我们还会有更多的机会在不同的社区上一起交流、一起学习、一起成长。希望你们常常的和我们虽然在 college 我们现在有这个条件，今后你们回到学校也能够跟我们一起共同的把我们 Newton 的家园建设得更好。也希望你们常常的回来和我们联系，有更多的机会一起和大家分享我们家乡的点点滴滴。Allen 要下去，或者其他同学要下也可以，因为现在这儿还有问题。那么立松，如果你想我们继续也没问题，谁下去也可以的。
那么就让立松把最后一个问题再问出来吧，看看。
好，立松接着来吧。
这个是 David Zhang 问的，他说 retrospectively, if there's one thing you could do differently at high school, what would that be?
I think it's just me and Lee who are left, so I can answer this. I think the things that I would change would not be academic. It would just be stuff like getting more sleep, maybe reaching out to my friends if I knew they were stressed, taking time to just do things for myself to relax. I think, as everyone said, high school is a really, really stressful time. And if you can find a chance to just kind of step back from the part where you get grades, study for tests, do all these things that involve like statistics and numbers that are sort of attached to your life, you'll find that, you know, they're not that meaningful. You know, it's really just a number. And it's really more important that you sort of take a step out of whatever's happening outside of that academic sphere. So I would definitely take more time to focus on that if I was in high school again.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I definitely wish I had more balance in high school, just rather than just like studying all the time or doing like speech or whatever. Really just taking time to like get sleep and just having time on my own to kind of settle down and center myself. Another thing I wish I did in high school was just talk to more upperclassmen about their experiences. Really, I think I was kind of a little bit stubborn. I was kind of like that person who's like, I'm gonna figure things out on my own. And that's kind of where you kind of run into different mistakes, but definitely talk to your upperclassmen. They've gone through the same things that you've gone through, and they have a lot of wisdom to impart. So if I went back to high school, definitely live a more balanced life and then talk to more upperclassmen.
Let me just add my input on this. You know, for those people who do not know me, I'm currently serving as a Newton School Committee member. And the primary missions of school now used to be the academic excellence, but now we're talking about social emotional learning as one of the key missions of public schools. I'm so glad that Lee and Jackie and other people mentioned that. Amy mentioned that too. Health, and it's very important. We're not only talking about physical health, we're talking about mental, emotional health. And I'm so glad you guys are being very happy and explore your own interest. And that's so critical now because in long term, the good health laid a really solid foundation for your whole life. If you have some difficulty, you do not manage well, it could be kind of hidden danger, risk. Probably this risk will stay there for many years, like a building. But when something happened outside, like an earthquake, and the weak building will collapse. You never know when it will happen. So I really want to emphasize, because I've been serving school committee for 3 years, and that's a lesson I learned. At first, I did not think too much about social emotional learning. I thought we're talking about academics. And that's my slogan for school committee campaign, academic excellence. But after 3 years, I really changing my philosophy now. So I'm so glad to hear from you guys. And in this uncertain world, when things are changing, a lot of anxiety, the health is even more critical. So please keep in mind, a lot of skills are replaced very quickly, but the health stay there. And of course, in the future, we can talk more about in my life and other parents' life. I was lucky to survive in cultural evolution. How could I survive? Kept the physical and mental health. So after all those years, I'm lucky still can work in community, work in my profession. So I think that's a theme I like to share with guys after I heard from you. And thank you, Lee, and you. I appreciate you said a lot of things like don't be afraid of failing, and don't afraid of you're lost, and try to look for direction. That's all important. And sometimes those messages were lost. And I'm glad you are only a boy or gentleman here. I'm glad because we have other two gentlemen, but because of conflict of schedules, they could not participate. So I'm glad you're here. Otherwise, we will miss your voice and perspective. So, okay, let me start here. Otherwise, I can talk on about this. So we're so happy to have you. And by the way, I did not tell the people this afternoon at school committee, 3 o'clock, we made a decision and Newton will have the hybrid going back to school learning model. And I know this is a big thing. So, but for those Newton parents, I know we can talk more about that. But again, now the social emotional learning becomes the primary goal of our schools. So, okay. Thank you so all. And let me stop here. 小易 take over. 小易。
我想我们今天应该是准时的10点钟结束，拖延了半个小时。我计算了每个同学的发言，他们的时间我都算了一下，都没有超过10分钟。我们是有限制的，做得非常的好。而且大家的问题主要是太多了。我们以后还会再继续做这类的有利大家的切身经历的一些活动。谢谢大家。我们牛顿教育促进会的所有的人都非常非常的努力，让我也感到了这个团体的一种团结，一种积极向上的一种，我相信每一个家长每一个孩子也一定会看到我们的努力，他们一定比我们做得更好。非常骄傲5位同学的参与。就像我刚才说的，我们现在是网上比较容易联络，将来我们在实体的时候也希望你们能够回来和我们一起把我们的家园做得更好。谢谢。
小易再告诉大家一下，欢迎大家，如果是牛顿的学校家长，欢迎参加我们的那个牛顿教育促进会。我们的
牛顿教育促进会始终把大门敞开，对每一位牛顿教育的家长和学生们，真的欢迎。除了家长之外，学生们也有微信，不知道微信将来会怎么样，但目前微信是最好用的。所以呢，希望大家能够加入我们的牛顿教育会。牛顿教育促进会，对不起，老师说的。好，大家晚安。
大家晚安，谢谢大家，谢谢。
谢谢翠珍，主持的非常好，非常漂亮，谢谢。
谢谢大家 ，OK，Good night。
谢谢你们，谢谢你们辛苦了，
谢谢。
谢谢所有的这个参与，
谢谢所有的人，
谢谢所有
人很努力，而且在短时间内做得这么好。
丽松，你知道这个在 YouTube 上有大概多少人参加？
有20多个，最多的时候。
那么我们这里最多大概有80个，70几到80个，是吧？
我看到的是74最多，我不知道还有没有最多的，76吗？
大概是这个74。